Good evening. I'm John Batchelor. This is the John Batchelor Show. Mary Kissel joins. Mary's going to be our guide to an unusual story that she has up at WSJ.com's Opinion Journal, which Mary hosts each day at 1 p.m., about the state of Illinois. I know it's a blue state. I know it's a state so far underwater, its unfunded mandates are well into the 22nd century. I understand it has a very high tax base. It punishes people to raise corporations in Illinois. I understand. Listening to us right now, stretching on the highway as fast as they can are people leaving the state of Illinois because of the tax base and because of the obstreperous government in Springfield, not to mention what's going on in Cook County. I know all that's true. However, Ms. Kissel, through her genius of booking, found someone to speak very carefully of the new Governor Rauner's new budget to the state legislature, which is dominated by Democrats, by the way, progressive Democrats, Democrats that once upon a time regarded Barack Obama as a middle-of-the-roader. That's the legislation in Springfield. But there's a new sheriff in town. His name is Rauner. He is a conservative. He won the Illinois governor's race to the surprise of everyone. And perhaps there's a new day. Mary, a very good evening to you.
Hi, John.
This was the booking that most caught my attention for months because I did not know there was a director of budget or someone to comment in Illinois about a budget that doesn't have any taxes in it. What's happening?
Yeah, it's amazing. It's like Chris Christie back in 2009. Here we have a governor, Bruce Rauner, who is actually telling the truth to the citizens of Illinois about the enormous fiscal hole that they find themselves in. And really, it has to be bad if they're going to elect a Republican to run the state of Illinois.
It was a Hail Mary election. I understand that. They hope for the best. The governor now presents, if I understand the presentation, no new taxes. In fact, he's going to reduce spending. He's looking for a balanced budget. This must be like witchcraft in Springfield.
It's a miracle.
They can't imagine it.
I know. It's never happened before. Well, he's promising to do several things. I talked today with Michael Lucci from the Illinois Policy Institute. This is a organization I have recently discovered, although it's been there for years. It's my mistake that I haven't found them before now. But Michael explained to me that the governor is not only cutting the budget, but he wants to do something extraordinary, which is to shift the public sector pensioners into what the rest of us do, which is called a 401k, where you can invest your own money. You have far more choices. You have the prospect of a greater upside. And yes, that's true, a downside as well. But you can effectively invest your own money. And you reduce the commitment of the taxpayer to paying these set pensions in the future. So this is a big budget savings for Illinois.
Do I hear...
If they do it.
Do I hear the screaming correctly? Doesn't this mean that the governor's declaring war on the public service unions? Doesn't this mean that he's taking on the scale of combat that recently we've seen in Wisconsin with Scott Walker?
Well, look, I think that even if you pay no attention to politics, which, let's be honest, most people do not have an incentive to do. They're very busy in their daily lives. They're taking the kids to softball practice. They're volunteering in the PTA. They're working. Even if you have no interest in politics, you understand that some things are not sustainable. And there is a fundamental unfairness about the idea that taxpayers would pay for guaranteed benefits for a certain portion of the workforce, but not for everybody else. And Chris Christie was actually very effective when he explained this dynamic in New Jersey when it came to the unions, because it was, let's be honest, a very depressed time. And the private sector unions were not getting work, and the public sector folks were getting these enormous payouts, and it was bankrupting everybody. So I think if you level with the American people, you're honest with them about what we can and cannot afford, I think they respond. I think that's why Rauner got elected. Now, we'll see if he's going to be as successful, because Christie has not been successful with the New Jersey legislature.
The state legislature in Trenton and the state legislature in Springfield are dominated by Democrats who are beholden to the public service unions.
Correct, but we will see how politically savvy Rauner is. Christie did well in his first year, and has basically accomplished nothing in the years afterwards. So we'll see how Ronner does.
Your colleague Joe Rago, and he presented what we know so far of the extraordinary and surprising development in Brownsville, Texas, heretofore understood as a border town, famous in the standoff with the Mexicans in 1916 and about to be the spaceport for SpaceX. But now, a federal judge on Monday this week surprises the White House with a temporary stay on the president's imminent executive order to grant extraordinary benefits to people who are here because they've had a child in the last 5 years and have no felony arrests to the satisfaction of the DHS. And the stay has thrown the White House in a spin.
It has. So 26 states prevailed at this first step of the courts with Judge Andrew Hannon, who effectively said to the president, you are affecting millions of people, so you're changing the law. And the president himself has said that, has kind of boasted about it. And these 26 states have said, yes, the federal government sets immigration policy, but we, the states, have representation through Congress, and you cannot just unilaterally change the law.
Because
that's
you're
Congress's
granting
duty.
benefits that will burden the state's taxpayers, such as licenses.
Correct, but this is not the end of the story.
Right.
This will clearly be appealed to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. It may go all the way up to the Supreme Court. We don't know yet. But the point that Joe made in his interview with me on Opinion Journal was that, look, the Republicans have just been given a great political gift. The courts are going to deal with this dispute. So why in the world would the Republican Party argue about this in Congress and threaten to shut down an essential part of the government, the Department of Homeland Security? And look, we can argue about how effective DHS is or not, but politically speaking, it would not look very good for the Republicans to shut down the Department of Homeland Security at a time when we have great unrest abroad and great threats here at home, just to make a political point, to score some points with the president. It's crazy. Let the courts deal with it.
It is a struggle, Mary, to deal with the Republican Party.
You're pausing.
It's just that I'm holding back by saying nothing the Republican Party does surprises me, because when faced with overwhelming success, there's always a moment when there's a way to defeat, or at least to what appears to be a setback.
Right.
And so we're at the edge of what appears to be a setback.
To snap defeat from the jaws of victory.
All right, now about defeat. The world economy is struggling in various parts.
That was an incredible transition, John.
Yeah, well, it's very nice. You're very, very good at segues. Mary is calling attention to the fact that she is a host and knows how to bridge. And one of the challenges to be with Mary each week is that these are two hosts, and she is doing her best to be a guest, and I'm doing my best to be a host, but it's easy to switch roles. Very easy to switch roles.
Well, here we are. I'm sorry.
No.
Defeat from the jaws of victory, John. I took you off course.
No, you didn't. It was an excellent end, and I wanted to bridge into the apparent victory of the Federal Reserve these last years, but their hesitation, defeatism, is one way to interpret it, because we're maintaining zero interest rates without an obvious rule or order about what they're seeking to achieve. There is a recovery. It is not vigorous, but in comparison to Europe or in comparison to Asia, our recovery is sound. Our dollar's in a bull phase. We have reason to believe that the jobs are improving, and yet you and Professor Cochran of the University of Chicago Business School and the Hoover Institution exchanged questions about when the Fed is going to move and why would it move on rates. And I got confused at the end whether John Cochran believes that the Federal Reserve is keeping this secret because that gives them as advantages, or whether they're really unsure whether they're going to raise rates.
Yeah, I was kind of unsure too at the end of the interview, but I was out of time, so I couldn't really press him on it. John Cochran, wonderful economist, thoughtful man. Love to talk to the Hoover Institution people. Right, so we're not in the same economic environment that we were in 2009.
Right.
The Fed has competing goals to care about price stability and employment. That's a debate for another day, whether or not that's a good idea. But the reality is that they've worked themselves into a real mess by accumulating a lot of assets, by keeping interest rates very low, by embarking on this grand monetary experiment. We don't really know where it's going to go or what the true consequences are. But John and I debated a bit about that today. And
what I got at the end, let me say if I heard you correctly, because everybody else can submit to studying this, is that somewhere around mid-year there may or may not be a decision which we may or may not be able to explain.
That's right.
That's good. That's the Federal Reserve. That's the magic of not understanding your own government. Mary Kissel, the editorial board of the Wall Street Journal. And remember, the Federal Reserve is independent of the White House.
Not really.
All right, fine.
Not so much.
Right, not so much. And we're turning now to what we love in New York, which is two mayors battling.
Like two hosts.
battling over the president's patriotism. It doesn't get better than this in New York. This is the kind of stuff we stand on street corners, even when it's cold, to argue about. Giuliani versus de Blasio. When we come back, I'm John Batchelor.